day. This webinar is being recorded, so if you've gotten that, just consent to it, because we also want to make sure that we have this available for some of our attendees or participants who wanted to be here but cannot for one reason or the other. And one of them being Bida, we're just trying to connect to him. He's having a few issues here and there with the network, but when he joins, we'll have him say hi so that we are not interrupting any schedules that you had already set on your side. So as I started earlier on, my name is Paula Rogito. If you've not met me before, I am the Senior Global HR and Payroll Specialist here at WorkPay as part of the growth team. That basically means that we help organizations at our department in terms of understanding how to be compliant and scaling across Africa. So both on a local and global level. Our panel of speakers with me, I think you've heard me mention them. We have Tracy Kinoti, who is part of the legal team. She's a senior legal and operations executive here at WorkPay. She will get a chance to just say hi to everyone and give us a word before we get into the speaking points. Also, we have Watson Muthi, who is part of the payroll team. He is a payroll ops specialist. So basically anything to do with payroll management across Africa, including South Sudan. Obviously, this is one of the areas of his specialty, and we'll be getting to hear him answer some of the questions that you had earlier enlisted when you declared your interest in the survey list that we had done before. So I'm going to go ahead and just welcome our speakers to say a word, and then I can continue. So
thank you, Pauline, and good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're dialing in from. As Pauline has greatly introduced me, my name is Tracy Kinoti. I am a lawyer. I work within the legal and compliance team here at WorkPay, where we support the business team and generally all teams across the board with matters compliance, any regulations, penetrating into new markets in the continent, and ensuring that we also handle our risk and compliance. So I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to also just learn from the speakers, be able to interact with all of you. And hopefully at the end of this session, we'll all be one step closer to fantastic payroll and compliance regulations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Watson, you can go next. I've seen Bida has already joined us, and then we can leave Bida to just say a word before we get into the speaking points.
Thank you so much, Paula, for this opportunity. My name is Watson Mure. I'm in the payroll department at WorkPay. So we are the ones responsible for running monthly payrolls for all countries across Africa, ensuring that statutories are remitted and paid. Yeah, I'm looking forward to an interactive session and to get even an opportunity to maybe support anyone who is in attendance, so that they are compliant with their payroll. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Watson, for that. Really appreciate it. Bida, are you in a position to talk? You can also say a word before we begin.
Okay. Thank you. So I thought that the discussion was on Google Meet. I had received a calendar invite, so I missed and tried joining using the Google link. And then later I got to review and realized that it's actually on. So, and this is my first time using this platform. It's good. It's a good experience, I must say. And yes, I want to thank everyone for joining, and also thank all the team at WorkPay for working to put this together. And I encourage all the participants to follow the discussions keenly, the key points of the speakers, and then at any point be able to raise any questions. And then also during the discussions, if something comes up that may not wait, you can drop your questions or comments in the chat box. That will be really helpful. But the point is we should make this session as interactive as possible, and then be able to learn from all the points that the speakers will be putting across. Also on my end, I look forward to learning from all that from all the discussions that will be happening here. And once again, thank you, Paula, and your team for putting this together.
Thank you for that. With us incognito, we have our marketing team. They're in charge of the beautiful works that you'll see here. I just want to give a big shout out and thank you, Bida, for that. So I'm just going to go ahead because of time. And I like what you said, that you want to make this as interactive as possible. So don't think of it of just a training or just like a webinar. Think of it as a way for you to also learn from us. If you have a question, we invite you to go ahead and just ask that question. If you have a pressing concern that maybe you just want to bring up that we can address, make sure you drop that in the chat box, and we will be checking that out so that we can, we can basically share knowledge, teach each other, learn from each other, and so on. So we're going to go ahead, and as you can see from the presentation that we have, I just want to use that to guide the discussion. Use us again, because initially when we started this, the need was that there's a lot of knowledge that people are seeking out in terms of HR compliance, in terms of payroll compliance. And so that's why we're having this great discussion. So we are doing this in collaboration with Excellence Foundation in South Sudan and WorkPay, which is what I want us to just share in terms of for you to know the team that is organizing what we're doing right now. So WorkPay, as I mentioned before, our headquarters is in Nairobi. I'm basically speaking from our Nairobi office, but we are all across Africa in terms of the offices we have, from Nigeria to South Africa, and also remote offices for across all of the other African countries that we are serving. And what we do at WorkPay is basically to simplify employee management across Africa. This includes South Sudan. As I've mentioned, we enable businesses to focus on growth by automating some of the complex HR and payroll tasks that you might be having. So whether you're thinking about the onboarding process, you're thinking about the leave management, time and tracking, disciplinary tracking, or even you want to outsource payroll or get an employer of records, we would be your go-to partner in terms of that. So what we do, again, we're in the business of empowering growth through streamlined payroll and HR automation solutions. We're trusted by more than 1,000 businesses, that is again across Africa. And that means that we are in more than 30 African countries. But again, we can be in more. That's why we're having such discussions to understand in the different markets, in the different localities, what are the challenges that people are having, and how can we empower them to know that such solutions are already in the market. Because as Africans, we're always looking to just give homegrown African solutions to our fellow Africans and grow each other, grow economies, yeah? So I'll go ahead, as I mentioned before, these are the talking points just to help us in terms of understanding what we're going to cover in this webinar. Again, welcome if you have just joined. We already did a poll to understand what are the biggest headaches that we have and introduced our speakers. So right now we're just going to go ahead and talk about the objectives of the webinar. So the first thing is, again, the pain point that we discovered in the different localities across Africa is, one, payroll compliance is a big headache where people do not understand the legal requirements and regulations, both statutory and otherwise, to make sure that they're fully compliant. And obviously, we'll get into what that looks like if you're not compliant, because we talk about compliance, but what are some of the pros, what are some of the cons to expect? So we'll also get into that. We also are going to talk about some of the common payroll challenges that are faced. So what that basically means is we have already identified some of the common issues, and we will present to you some of the best practices to navigate through them. And what this looks like, obviously, is we also had a survey before. In case you had not filled that out, we gave you a chance to tell us what are some of the areas or what are some of the issues that you already are encountering as challenges, and how can we come in through this webinar to just educate you on how to be more compliant or better in that function. We are also going to go ahead and talk about the role of payroll automation. Some of the speaking points are going to be the role of payroll automation. So you learn how automation is going to help you in terms of streamlining the processes, which obviously one of the key benefits you get is reducing errors, but there's also the aspect for efficiency. So we're talking about time and cost efficiency, right? And we also have the other areas or the other objectives that we have, which is essential payroll components. So we'll share with you what are the taxes that are usually in your payroll or to expect in case when you do your payroll, you're not quite sure what should already be there. We'll talk about some of the benefits and deductions as well. Basically what it takes for you to have a compliant payroll. There are different components that builds onto what I would consider the cake, right? And as I've mentioned before, with the team, with the panel of speakers, we have our legal team here from WorkPay, represented by Tracy. So she's going to talk through the legal risk of non-compliance. As I've mentioned, we keep talking about compliance, but what are some of the pros and what are some of the consequences when you fail to meet some of these regulations? And obviously HR and payroll more or less are entwined, but because it all boils down to getting the workforce and paying them and making sure that you're in good books with the government. And lastly, we're also going to talk about how do you optimize payroll or payroll automation in terms of business growth. And that's where we talked about WorkPay being your partner in terms of making sure you're able not just to manage your workforce locally, but also if you're looking to expand across Africa, what would that look like? So we'll discover some of the strategies that I'll keep dropping as we're talking about it to make sure that payroll management is more efficient and more scalable. Again, I invite you, if you have any questions, if you have anything that you would like us to just go back and, maybe go over a little bit, drop a chat so that we're able to just have a bit more structure in the webinar, and then our team is there just helping us in guiding how we're going to also address it in the Q&A if you're not able to address it with the team that is going to, the team of speakers. So what to expect from this webinar, aside from the objectives that I've shared, is one, you need to understand what is payroll compliance and why does it matter? How does it impact your business? So as I mentioned before, the word compliance can be such a big thing, and you might not understand the importance of it, or you might feel it does not relate to your organization, but we'll explain how that matters for the different organizations that are here and even outside, because obviously we're hoping that you're going to be ambassadors or just be very evangelical from this webinar to make sure that you're also sharing with your workmates and the people that you're going to interact in your professional networks on the importance of this. So we also have payroll challenges. So what are the common issues? This is again what we're going to discuss. What are the common issues? How are you going to solve them? And also, what is a sync between HR and payroll? So how do the two collaborate? Because sometimes HR and payroll can look like they're two different worlds, but they're talking about the same thing. So we'll talk about the sync between the two. And then we also have some of the components to expect from payroll. We'll break it down for you, the legal risk as we've shared, and the question and answer session. So we expect you to have loads of questions, even as we're going through it. If you have anything, please just keep a note of it or drop the chat and we'll be able to talk through them. So the common challenges when we talk about payroll processing. So generally the word processing means that you have a list of all your employees, you have what they're expecting in terms of the salaries, and you're supposed to process it because part of the regulations from the governments or from the regulatory bodies is that there are statutories, there's taxes to be deducted, there's some other bodies in there, again, statutories, to make sure that they also get a percentage, either it is going to your pension, either it is going to the National Medical Fund, or either even for you as an employee, you are tasking your organization to just do remittances for you, either for student loans or anything that is would touch on what your take home would be. Your take home is what we refer to as the net pay or the net salary. So that is the whole journey that we're going to be talking about when you say payroll processing. So what are the common challenges? Again, this is what we got from our own research, from our interactions in the markets. And I'm not just talking about Kenya, I'm not just talking about Nigeria, South Africa, Malawi, Uganda, or South Sudan. I'm just talking specifically for this webinar, the ones that we're able to get from your answers and the research. So some of the challenges that we have seen, again, would be one, a lot of professionals are going through the challenge of manually doing HR processes. So what do I mean by HR processes? I'm talking about leave management, someone or an employee applying for leave, knowing their balance, understanding what levels of approvals are there, understanding what policies are governing all of that. We also have the other aspect of expenses, which I'm sure we're all familiar with. For example, in your organization, if you go through the extent of you have to incur company expense either by going for a trip, paying for something, how do you get reimbursed, just to make sure that you're not interrupting any company operations because you're not sure of how the reimbursement works. So these are some of the manual HR processes, or these are some of the processes that generally are in the HR office. The other process would look like time tracking or attendance management, where we're looking at maybe you need to sign a form, or you need to sign a book, or you just need to show a way that you came to the office at what time. So these are what we're talking about as manual HR processes, on top of many other things that usually make up the HR office. Again, as we go on, you'll just get to learn what that looks like. That could also include contracting, that could also include performance management, it could also include disciplinary management, because HR is so broad in that way. And the other challenges that we notice is payroll errors. Obviously, if you talk about manual, it means that either you're using Excel sheets or you're using a way that there's a way someone can either edit the formula, or just a sheet can be deleted, some records can be lost, and sometimes there's a lot of processes, like it moves with a lot of hands. So it moves from HR or operations to HR, from HR to now finance to somebody else, to the banks. So all those steps are areas that basically you're opening up yourself to the risk of manual errors. So that means that you are prone to making errors. You're prone to very many delays, especially if you're talking about approvals being in that pipeline. We also look at the penalty risk, because as much as you are delaying all of this, is also the deadlines that usually are stipulated when it comes to doing your returns, stipulated when it comes to making sure that you are paying the government in terms of the statutories, either the filings, and also for you as an employee. For example, if in the contract, either you're a consultant or a fixed-term employee, if there's any delay, maybe you're expecting the organization to pay you a fine and a percentage of it, that is also one of the liabilities that the organization, one of the things that the organization is going to lose out on because of all of these errors, all of these manual processes. We also talked about, or we also realized the complex compliance that are there. So many of you answered, just understanding the tax laws is a headache. Like, you think about, what should I know? Maybe you're just new at the role, or even in the last job you are in, it was a for-profit, and then you move to a not-for-profit. How exactly do you juggle the two? Because there's usually there's a bit of regulations in that. There's differences in how the government considers the two. One could be more eligible for taxes, another one could be exempt from other taxes. And also there could be some changes that affect key areas in the industry that you're in, and you don't understand how that is supposed to how you're supposed to juggle all that, process all that information, and be able to apply to the payroll on time, especially, again, talking about designing tools from scratch and so on. So these are the complexities of compliance that we're talking about. And if you've done payroll before, you understand that generally payroll is complex. So that's why we talk about WorkPay being a solution. When we talk about simplifying, we really do understand what goes into the work, and we have a team that does this for you, and we've seen this need in the market. So how do you manage employees globally in terms of the risk attached to it, making sure that you're compliant, and also some of the legal challenges? For example, if you have to navigate, again, if you're scaling globally, and it could even be you're scaling just in your country like South Sudan, but you're moving from one town to the other to another. Maybe you have like 6, 7 branches. How exactly are you supposed to deal with all of them? And maybe the office for HR or payroll is just one. How does that look like? We also talk about entering new markets. So with entering new markets, as I've mentioned before, we want you to think of WorkPay. When you think of us, just think of us as a strategic hand that will help you in terms of scaling globally. So that means tackling labor laws, making sure that all the entities are compliant, making sure that the HR complexities are ironed out. So One of the key products that we have at WorkPay, again, after 7 years of understanding what the market looks like, after 7 years of understanding these challenges that I'm mentioning here, we are offering you solutions that, for example, one of the key genius solutions that I think are in the market is employer of record. So for example, you're looking to get into Kenya from South Sudan, or you're looking to get into Uganda, Rwanda, or Tanzania, and you don't have a presence there. And just the process of registering, just the process of making sure that you're compliant before you can engage employees and even, engage all these people that are supposed to help you, it could take time. It could take from 2 months to even 1 year, depending on how complex it is. But maybe the project that you're managing or the timelines that you have do not allow that kind of time. So we have what we call an employer of record solution, where you're able to still engage the employees through us, where we will be the employer of record, and you can continue with your projects as you continue on the side on just making sure that you're being compliant in terms of registrations, getting all the advice that you need. And when you're proper, you can be able to now either set up an office with your name and everything. The other solution would look as outsourcing your payroll function. So maybe you've done all of that, but when it comes to just navigating what the complex tax laws look like, you need to engage a lot of people. You need to test out their services and see what that looks like. We come with a plug and play solution where you just tell us these are the employees, and we're able to bill you that, and you have outsourced all of that just like that. So these are some of the solutions that I keep talking about that would really help in terms of making sure, one, you do not accumulate fines, you take away the complexity of payroll processing. So what does it look like? For a lot of you who have already registered, again, I'm seeing more people are joining. So what are the processes when it comes to payroll process, for example? So what are the step-by-step? If I was to tell you, run your payroll right now, what does the roadmap look like? Just allow me to take a sip of coffee. So when it comes to the payroll process, I'm going to talk about the journey. So just follow my cursor to see where we're going. This is a starting point. The first point of managing your payroll, and Watson is going to talk about some of the questions that you already had in there, is HR data inputs. So what does this entail? One, it entails making sure that you put in the employee details, the name, the bank details, the salary that they're owed, the details on their statutory, for example, what is their tax PIN, what is their social security PIN, what is, again, for South Sudan, I know that is NSIF. And I also know there is, we look at the different payroll components there, but mostly we talk about PIT and NSIF, so the pension and the tax. So what are their PINs before you process their payroll? Because as an employer or as a HR office, you're the legal representative of the organization as the employer, you need to make sure that you are deducting the right statutory amount and doing the remittances. That wholly falls on your department. So that means also the record management falls in your department. So making sure that the contract dates are okay in case you need to prorate, making sure that for the case of, so maybe you're giving benefits such as pension, making sure you have all the details correctly, whether it is company shared or the company shared, meaning the company and the employee, or just company offered, meaning only the company is offering that. And also if there are other sections such as the attendance tracking, that's why earlier on I talked about operations. So for example, if there's an overtime aspect, how are you able to track that? How are you able to incorporate that into the payroll? If there's anything to do with timesheets, in case maybe your employees are billing you according to the hours, in case the project that you're working on, again, with NGO space, there's projects and there's hours put into them that you need to consider when you're making out the payroll. There's also the donor requirements and so on. And also for the leave, for example, you're considering encashment. For example, if you're considering, maybe someone takes an unpaid leave, all of that information needs to be part of the payroll. So those are some of the different, and as I mentioned, complexities that you want to just make sure that you consolidate into one platform, which WorkPay can do. So that's the first part that you want to make sure that you get right, the HR data inputs. The second step would look like, now we're just going down the road in terms of the second step of payroll processing. it would look like now actually doing the processing. So you have all the information you need. You have the list of the employees, their salaries, and all the deductions and components that are going to basically build up or take away from the payroll or the take home of the employee. So one, you have to make sure that the salary calculations are okay, meaning that the statutory deductions that you're making, the tax statutory also includes the pay as you earn, what we call in Kenya, but for you that's personal income tax. So the PIT is correct. The NSIF, which is SSSF for us, is correct, and also the SAT tax in case there's that. So for us, we consider this as gratuity, but it's basically the tax that is added on top of what you had already earlier been deducted. So gratuity looks like or severance that we are giving you this money either because you're being laid off or we just want to thank you because of the good work that you've been doing, or it's part of the policy that we have as an organization. So there's an added tax to it where you're being taxed an extra amount, and that is what SAT tax is. And we also have the overtime aspect. We have bonus computations. We have different components that could build onto the payroll processing part. So at this point, you will notice a lot of people will either use Excel sheets, a lot of people will either use a computation online from somewhere where they maybe get a free calculator and then they just make the payments. But aside from making the payments, are you being compliant in the sense that you have records? Because yes, it's good that you've gotten the right amount, but the employee also needs a payslip. The organization needs reports. The filing statutories also need reports. So all of these things can be time consuming if you have not consolidated it. And that's why we talk about seamless payroll processing. We talk about efficiency in payroll processing. And we talk about automation in this sense as well. Because for example, at WorkPay, at the click of a button, you get all of this. You get all of the reports, you get all of the breakdown. The employee can access their payslip from the other side. No questions asked. There's nothing that feels dubious. It's very straightforward. And so at this point, after you've done the payroll processing, we now go to the compliance check. So again, this part is usually, for example, you'd find in your organization, maybe the HR is in part 1 and 2, and then part 3 is where now the accounts or the finance office comes in to make sure that the deductions are done correctly, the processing was done correctly. So with the compliance check, we're basically looking at, are you compliant with what has already been provided by the law? Are the deductions okay? Are the contributions that you're making for pension or medical or all of these things in the payroll, are they correct? We also look at if you are to do an audit in your organization, maybe that's something that is required. This is usually required for both NGO space and also for profit or commercially focused businesses. So if you were to do an audit, would you be compliant? Again, these are some of the key things that are very important, especially if you're looking at financing, if you're just looking at also being counted as someone who's reliable, because when your books are not okay, usually it means also, the money in, the money out is in question. So the compliance check is really important. That's why even for organizations, they have like an audit office that reports directly to the board and things like that. The last part would be the payment and documentation. So all is good where we've already, that's why we talked about the different approval, the different hands being exchanged, the different offices seeing this payroll information and processing it. Again, that's another thing. If your organization, one of the policies that management feels is that they don't want people to have access to this information, the solution of payroll as a service where you outsource that function to us would actually be perfect for your organization. Again, these are things we've seen in the market after 7 years of research and just, learning more from organizations and trying to see what is the best way to give this solution. We come up with such innovative solutions. So that would now come to the payment and the documentation. So what this looks like as a fourth step in payroll processing is making sure that one, you disburse the salaries and not just disburse it anytime you feel like, but on time. So for example, if every payroll cycle is monthly, I expect that at the end of the month, my salary is in my bank account, or I'm able to collect that cash, I'm able to collect the check, depending on whatever method your organization or company is using to make sure that you get your take-home salary. So disbursement of salary. We also talk about the payslip. So am I able to get a breakdown? Again, this is a legal requirement where employees are actually owed a payslip. Like, I need to see how you came to the conclusion that this is going to be my take home. And I also need to know that you've done the filing of the statutory deductions, that when I retire after 30 years of working, my pension is safe. When I am, when I go to trade or something like that, the tax man is not looking at my papers and saying that I have not done any remittances. Yes, on record, I'm saying that I'm employed. And also the other compliance reports, such as the tax form, as I've mentioned, that usually come about when you're about to do your own personal filing. So that depends also on the financial year. So these are some of the things that we talk about when it comes to payroll processing, the 4 steps. What I like about the solution, again, I really want to point us to the solution that we're also offering, is that I've talked about the employee being in a position to see their payslip. So whether you're the one who's managing it, also for you, you have a payslip, you have a take home, this is a chance for you to be able to see the deduction. And again, these are some of the things that we talk about being used as employee to finance some of their projects. So whether the bank needs this, they can be able to extract it from their side. They can just go to the HR office for stamping or something like that. Or they can also be coming to the office just to sign in case that's something that you want to practice. Again, with donor-funded organization, some of these things are requirements. These are some of the things that the donors want to see to know that truly you actually have workers and you're honoring your side as an employer and you're treating them well, and so on and so forth. So I've talked a lot, and I really want to make sure that we are all in tandem in terms of what I'm talking about. So I'm just going to do a poll, give you 2 seconds, give you a full minute to digest what I've said. And so the question would be, which payroll challenge do you find most frustrating? So this is just choose one thing that, again, I want to see how well we are doing in terms of understanding what your needs are. So what is a payroll challenge that you really find frustrates you? If you run payroll or if you are aware of the payroll journey, what do you feel is very frustrating? Thank you. I'm seeing that you are answering. So I want to encourage you. Earlier on, Bida encouraged all of us to just be very participative because this is an interactive session. And I want us to learn from each other. And as we learn from each other, it's going to also help us in terms of the value that you're getting from this session. So I'm seeing that some new people are joining just as we're speaking. Okay, so I'm seeing a lot. Okay. Okay. Cool. Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Keep filling that in. Thank you. Okay, so as that poll goes on, I'm just going to go ahead and now introduce the last part before the other speakers are able to also share their knowledge on some of these areas that you're looking to learn. Initially, we talked about what to expect from this webinar. So I like that you already have some quorum in terms of how many people have joined. So the key payroll components that you're expecting to get from this is one, when it comes to any payroll processing, is that the taxman will always be at your door. And that basically means that there's going to be income tax brackets. So what this basically means is that you might find for a lot of organizations, including South Sudan as well, or for a lot of countries, there's bands. So between 0 to, let's say, $500 or 0 to $1 million or 0 to 100,000 or 0 to 20,000, for example, that's a first band. Then anything above it to another amount, that's a second band. And the percentages usually start either with the lowest being the highest, and then the higher you go, the percentage reduced because of the amount of tax that you're going to be paying. So this is the tax brackets or the tax bands that we talk about. The next thing is the pension fund. So this can be called either the National Security Insurance Fund, that's basically pension, or the Social Security Insurance Contribution, that is basically as well pension, where the employer, in this case, particularly for South Sudan, we're looking at 17%, and 17% for the employer to contribute towards your SSSF. In this case, for you, it's called the NSIF. And that would be for local. Now for expatriate, it would look like 6%. And for the employee on your side, for the citizens or for the local employees, it would be 8%. And if you're international, 3% is going to be deducted from your pay for this particular contribution. The other component would look like tax on personal income tax. So I talked about personal income tax being, depending on the different bracket that you're in, there's a percentage that you're going to be deducted as your personal income tax. But there's also another tax called the tax. So this is usually an additional 30% on high earnings. So this could depend on some of the items are eligible for tax. Again, this is already configured on WorkPay if you're using the system. And again, I don't want to bomb you with a lot of information, but we could also get into to know you what go to breaking down what this looks like for the different categories that are eligible for tax and what that looks like in terms of the take home for the employee. We also have the other component, which is allowances and benefits. So obviously there are different categories for this. Is it taxable? Is it not taxable? And again, the other component that you might not have factored in is that for commercially focused organization or for profit organizations, usually most of the things are going to be taxed. But for some, when it comes to the NGO space, when it comes to not-for-profit space, you'll find that a lot of the things are tax exempt already from the government. So those are some of the nitty-gritties or the nuances that you need to also consider. And at this point, I'm just going to go ahead and invite Tracy, if you can just take it off from here.
Thanks, Pauline. That was fantastic. So at this point, when it comes to, maybe I'll also just say, when it comes to HR compliance or HR payroll and compliance, the intersection between legal and payroll is fired up because a lot of things are intertwined just in terms of the compliance aspect of payroll. That's also tied to the legal law. So when you look at the framework, like the legal framework of South Sudan, we're looking at things like the Labor Act, the labor laws, tax laws, data protection laws. So that intersection, and I know Watson will be chiming in at this later. So some of the risks that we look into, and maybe I can just begin by explaining some of the challenges that we experience or that we have seen are frequent law changes. So the landscape is forever evolving and very fast. So just keeping up with that. And I think from the poll, I noticed that's a very common challenge that is faced by a number of you. Something else is just the regulation, the tax calculations, and the remittance of the same. How does that happen? So on our end, we ensure that from the legal department, we ensure that we work very closely with local legal partners, as well as stakeholders in the region. So we have stakeholders across the continent who we work very closely with, just in terms of keeping up with the laws. Sometimes the laws come into place. Have they been enacted? Have they been gazetted? When do they take effect? Do we backdate them? So those are the challenges that we've seen and that we usually anticipate as we're doing our risk compliance audit. Something else is ensuring that our digital infrastructure, which is our platform, is customized to be legal. So in terms of if you're going to run payroll, we ensure that we work with our internal stakeholders to ensure that our digital infrastructure is fully set up, is functional, and is legal. So if you want to run payroll, everything that is automated is in line with the laws of your country. Something else to ensure that also internally, because we're handling sensitive data, and in the era of data protection and privacy laws, we ensure that our internal policies ensure that we're able to support data protection of our clients, their employees, their partners, their suppliers. We ensure that this is kind of is very watertight. We do these policies internally. We're also able to help our clients mitigate any cases of data breaches that could happen. Maybe you have an employee who's landed on something that they should not have. So we ensure that we're also able to assist you with mitigating any breaches and knowing how to go about that legally. I would also speak about cross-border functions. So sometimes you want to either, or in a lot of cases, especially with the evolving African global workspace, we're seeing a lot of cross-border work and payments. If you want to consult on any matters to do with currencies, cross-border payments, cross-border compliance, we're able to assist you with that because that also appears to be a common challenge, if anything. So those are the challenges we've seen versus the risks that we've been able to look at. So at this juncture, I can invite Watson to speak a bit about payroll, and I can also add on to anything that he may have, and we'll be able to get into the questions that you've brought up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Tracy, for presentation. Yeah, so I'm supposed to cover the part of the Q&A on payroll questions. So we received some questions from the people involved in processing payrolls in South Sudan. And they highlighted most of the issues that they are facing. So we narrowed down to the questions that are displayed on your screen. So I want to go through them. So the first one is, how do you ensure compliance with national laws in HR processes? So basically we are guided by, in payroll we are guided by several acts. So the first act is the Taxation Act. Then we are guided by the Social Insurance Act, the Labor Act, and the recent Financial Act 2023-2024. So I'll just give you an overview of the entire payroll process and how we are guided by these acts. So on the Taxation Act, for example, the first thing that I'll highlight is about payment of wages and salaries. So when running payroll, you need to understand what does the law state about payment of wages and salaries. The first thing that it states is that all employers are supposed to pay wages or salaries of their employees without discrimination on the basis of nationality, in the same legal tender as stated in certain sections of the Act. And something else that the Labor Act states is that payment of wages or salary should be made during working hours or working days. It should be made to the bank account that the employee has advised you as the employer. So if your employee has advised that you should pay them to a certain bank account, it is unlawful for you to send his salary to a different bank account. And something else that is stated in the Act is that employers shall pay wages or salary of employees based on several categories. So the first category is if your employees are employed on an hourly or daily basis, you pay them at the end of each day. That's something that you need to note. Your employees are employed for a period of up to 1 month, then they should be paid at the end of each month. If your employees are employed to perform a certain task, they should be paid at the completion of the task. So those are some of the things that you need to know about payments of salaries. So that means if you employ someone on a daily basis, it's unlawful for you to have them wait for their salary up to the end of the month. So the next thing that I'd like to highlight is about deductions from the wages and salaries. So one thing you need to know is that as an employer, you're supposed to pay the net salary to every employee. So the net salary is the result of gross salary minus all the deductions that are applicable for every employee. So the deductions that are applicable for an employee, one, we have the taxes, we have social security, and we have other contributions as long as they are provided by law. So something that you need to know about deductions is that every employee should be informed of any deductions that are supposed to be made. So an employee should not just find that you've made some deductions in their payslip and they are not aware about them. That is against the law. Then something else that you're supposed to do is that every employer should provide their employee the written pay statement in writing form, in writing and in a language that an employee understands. So by this, I am referring to a payslip. So as an employer, you are mandated to provide your employees with payslips. Then the Act proceeds to specify what should appear on the payslip. So the first component is that the gross amount of the employee should appear. Then all the deductions that have been made should also appear on the payslip. That component is the net amount. That is the amount that the employee will receive in their bank account. Any accrued entitlements owed to that employee should also appear on the payslip. So it's worth noting that an employer who fails to provide an accurate payslip in accordance with the Act will be held liable and punishable by law. So those are some of the things that, as WorkPay, we ensure that we provide to our employees to ensure that we are compliant. Something else that I need to highlight is about something called a wage or salary register. So every employer should maintain a wage or salary register in which all particulars of an employee's salaries, deductions, and net salaries paid to an employee have been noted regularly. So in case of audits, in case of inspections by labor officials or tax officials, we should have a register where you have all your employee salaries recorded, area to which you will definitely be considered non-compliant, and that will definitely affect your operations. So those are some of the few guidelines that guide us as WorkPay when we are conducting our payroll operations. So I've tackled the first and third part by giving you that overview. The second point was, can we provide templates for payroll processing? We have templates for payroll processing. On our website, we have an online calculator that you can select the country, that is South Sudan, any country that you would prefer. Then you would enter the gross salary, then it would generate for you the net salary and the taxation and all the deductions. That's one of the templates that you can use. Maybe the only challenge with that would be reports. By using that, you would not get payroll reports, you would not get social security reports, you would not get tax reports. So if you want a standard template, definitely be by using our system. So our system has already has a configured template for South Sudan. So by that, you will just have to enter the employee details. Then it will process all the net salaries, all the taxes, the social security. By that, you'll also be in a position to generate reports. You'll also be in a position to generate pay slips. And so that's the most efficient payroll template that I can recommend for anyone. So as the webinar provides HR software recommendations. So the most ideal tool at the moment for payroll automation would be our system, because it's all in one. So it will help you manage the entire payroll process from onboarding an employee all the way to generating pay slips and sending salaries to their bank accounts. That's what we also use on our end for our clients in South Sudan. So the next issue was, will you cover timesheets, explain tracking hours and the impact on payroll? So about tracking hours, so our system has a time and attendance as well. So for time and attendance, you will notice that it's important to always track your employees' attendance. In cases where we also have overtime, for example, our system is already configured in such a way that you can tell weekends and weekdays. If your employees are entitled to overtime, you can tell that if it's on a working day, then that employee is entitled to overtime at the rate of 1.5. if it's on a weekend, that employee is entitled to overtime at a rate of 2. So you don't have to do that manually and keep tracking that this employee work for overtime on a weekday or on a weekend. The system can automatically do that based on the employee's clock in time and the clock out time. So definitely they have a huge impact on payroll because, for example, if an employee, this is just an example, if an employee joins the company maybe midway through the month, then at the end of the month, that employee does not expect to receive their full pay. So their salary will be prorated based on the days worked. So that's where timesheets come in, because they can track that this employee has worked for, let's say, 10 days. And through that, the system will be in a position to know that since the employee has worked for 10 days, their salary at the end of the month will be for the 10 days. In case, if an employee is supposed to work for 8 hours every day, then maybe they are 8 and then they work for, let's say, 5 hours. The system will automatically tell that they work for 5 hours, and so it will pay them for the 5 hours. So the system helps a lot in ensuring that at the end of the day, an employee is paid whatever they are supposed to be paid. So the last question was, what are the tax implications for payroll in South Sudan? So breakdown of employer and employee tax responsibilities. So let me just go through a calculator. So basically, when it comes to deductions, we have personal income tax and we have the social security. So for the personal income tax, we have several tax bands that are supposed to be used. So the first one is from 0 to, for salaries between 0 to 20,000, the rate is 0%. And for salaries between 20,000 to 40,000, taxed at a rate of 5%. From 40,000 to 57,000, they are taxed at a rate of 10%. And from 57,000, so just a moment, to 90,000, they are taxed at 15%. Anything above 90,000 is taxed at 20%. So it's worth noting that in South Sudan, we use a direct tax module. So it's not progressive. So if you fall in category of 20,000 to 40,000, if your salary falls between 20,000 to 40,000, you'll be taxed at a straight 5%. It's unlike other countries where it's progressive, where we have to check the previous tax band. So that's for personal income tax. Then the next deduction is National Social Insurance Fund, which is in most countries it's referred to as Social Security. So for employee, the employee deduction is 8% of your gross salary. And that's for local residents. But for international employees, they are taxed at 3%. So that's something that's worth noting. So when the beauty of using a system is you can classify an employee as a local or international. So if you classify them as local, the system will automatically deduct 8% as social insurance fund. But if you classify them as international, the system will automatically deduct 3%. So once we get the deductions, now we compute the net salary. So the net salary, of course, is gross salary minus all the deductions. So the personal income tax and social security are the only deductions at the moment. Then employer contributions, we have the social security as well. So employer contributes 17%, again for local residents, then 6% for international employees. The last thing would be surtax. So surtax is tax that is levied on tax. That is why it's referred to as surtax. So at the moment, it's 30%. So 30% of your personal income tax will be paid by the employer as surtax. So that's something that is worth noting as well. So that's the last bit where I've given you a breakdown of the employer and employee tax responsibilities. Yeah, so that's all that I was supposed to cover on my end. And I hope at least now everyone has an idea of the importance of complying with the Taxation Act, importance of complying with the Labor Act. Yeah. So maybe Paula, you can take it over from that.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Tracy. Thank you so much, Watson, for such a comprehensive walkthrough on what, again, a lot of the participants are very eager. This is just but a sample size of what was being asked. I know many of you asked more or less the same thing in terms of what does compliance look like for your organization, very generic questions for some, very detailed for others. So we picked at least 6 that we felt should be addressed in this, just to make sure that you get value in terms of the time that you have put in to just come to this. And as we have mentioned here, we're in collaboration with the Excellence Foundation for South Sudan. Vida Thomas is on call already. And at our team at WorkPay, what we had earlier started with, in case you're not with us there, is that we help you in terms of simplifying employee management. And part of it is going to look like payroll management, yeah? And that's why you're seeing that a lot of the discussions we're having for this particular webinar topic would look like payroll management. And we're looking to partner with organizations that are either looking for, I know some of the questions was around what are the solutions you can recommend in the market, how do you design a tool from scratch, and so on and so forth. And what I would advise you, obviously, because everyone here is a professional that is already doing this kind of payroll processing, you're already interested in compliance, is that the solution that we're giving you, the solutions that I would highly recommend, obviously, as a senior HR and payroll advisor here, would be that you need to pair up with an organization that is going to help you, not just for tomorrow, or not just for now, but also for tomorrow. Because right now you could be having a workforce of 5 people, but you're going to grow to a workforce of 20, 50 people. How are you planning on managing that? How are you consolidating to make sure that you're able to fully manage your workforce in a way that they can count you as a credible employer? Are you giving them the pay slips? Do they know how you're doing the computation? And even for you internally, are you able to provide some of these reports that you're talking about and some of the legal requirements from your side by the government? Yeah. And when it comes to just generally, maybe you're good with compliance, but some of the issues that you'd like to improve on would look like making sure employees have a smoother onboarding process. Do you have a system for that? Are you automating some of these solutions, such as leave management? Because that is also a statutory obligation, because after a full worked month, I need to accrue maybe 2 leave days, yeah? So how are you able to keep track of the accruals that I'm doing? And then how am I able to apply and see that I can be able to go and rest and be with my family and things like that? So I've just projected what my work details are at. If I have sent you the details on the webinar on email, you should be in a position to access it as well. And at this point, I'm just going to let anyone that has a question, we had promised a Q&A. So if you have a question that you felt maybe has not been addressed, this is your chance. You can go ahead and ask that question. So just a question. So if you raise your hand or if you put it in the chat, we'll be able to take that question up. And obviously, as we wait, I'm going to go ahead and just ask you the final question, just to get a feel of how we're doing. How do you feel about today's session? Do you feel like you learned a lot? Do you feel like, how was it for you? Maybe you can also be answering that as we wait for the question. I would really like for you to be very honest. Obviously, you're going to use this to understand whether or not you're going to have more conversations like this or less, or which topic you want us to focus on. And also, if you want us to reach out to you, because a lot of the people who answered in the last poll when you were asking for this webinar is that you were looking for a cloud solution. So for those people who will reach out, you don't need to stress about that.
Okay, maybe Paula, if you allow me,
Yes, please go on.
So I'd like to, I've seen there are 2 questions in the chat on the Q&A. So maybe if you allow me, I would proceed to answer them.
Go ahead.
So one of the questions is, how long should payroll record be kept? I think maybe Tracy would be looking at that later, because that is in issues to do with data compliance. So the next one is, what taxes need to be withheld from employee paycheck? So I've advised about that. That is the personal income tax and social security. Then how do I stay compliant with payroll regulation? Yeah, again, that is about, so the good thing with our system is that in case we have any changes in payroll and taxes, we always update them on time. So for example, you find for the taxation act, for example, we used to have some old brackets in South Sudan. Then in 2024, the Financial Act 2023-2024 came with new changes, and the tax brackets were changed from the old ones to new ones. So immediately that was done, we were abreast with that. Then we managed to do the changes on our end. So with our system, we don't really have to be so worried about payroll regulation being compliant, because we do that on our end, and it affects all our customers across board. So the next question was, someone stated that on a compliance check, I have experienced something after working on the payroll and submitting to finance for compliance check. Finance usually tells me, we believe everything you sent is correct, and they take no time to review the payroll. So what's the best way forward to avoid this from recurring, to have finance really take up that compliance check part? This is a common problem in most organizations, where you find everyone is quite busy with whatever they are doing. So if you send someone something to approve, they just take your word for it. But you find in our system, we have something called approvals. So we have levels of approval. So if you're from payroll, then you approve the payroll, someone from finance have to do another approval on the payroll. So without all those steps, then the payroll cannot get to the final part. That's something that with our system, that's something that we actually use in our organization. So once I'm done with payroll, then someone else has to go through it on the system as well and approve. That's one way in which our system can assist you with that. Yeah, so those are the 2 questions that I wanted to answer on my end. Paula, you can proceed.
Yeah, maybe I can just answer the question 2 from Mark. He asks, how long should payroll records be kept? So internally, we have a data protection and privacy policy, and according to our policy, we do data retention for at least 7 years, so a minimum of 7 years. Reason being, it's important to have these records for audit purposes, for reference purposes, for even dispute resolutions that may arise in the future. So internally, we do that for a period of 7 years, but we will definitely check whether this is in tandem with the National Revenue Authority. I believe there it says 5 years, but we should check on that. So that's how long periods should essentially be withheld for. I hope that answers your question, Mark. I believe there's no other question that makes reference to any other legal matters. And with that, I will pass it back to our able moderator, Pauline.
Thank you so much for everyone who joined. A special thank you to our panel of speakers from legal, from payroll, Watson and Tracy. We really appreciate it. Special thank you to Bida Thomas from the EFSS. We really appreciate the support you've given us. And obviously to every single person who has joined in, has shared the link with a friend, has learned a thing or two. We really appreciate it. And we hope to have more of this that you feel are both beneficial for you. And on our side, we're looking to also just partner with professionals and organizations that are looking to also automate their HR processes. And obviously, this is in an effort to just making sure that you're giving them solutions that are homegrown in Africa that they can use in the different spaces that we're in and grow our economies. So thank you for that. And I'm going to leave everyone to just leave at their own pace. If you've not answered the poll, make a point of answering the polls that are there. It really helps us to know whether or not this was helpful to you. And we appreciate you. In terms of the details on us, you already have my detail there. I'll be able to reach out to you later to just give you a special thank you and initiate a discussion in case that's something that you're interested in. Bida, maybe you can give us a vote of thanks or just give us a parting remark before we log off.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, all the panelists, and also thank you to everyone who has taken time to be able to join the call, and to everyone who has asked questions. I believe that you have received satisfactory answers, and I also believe that by joining this webinar, most of the questions you had in your mind, especially those that you shared through the survey, have been answered satisfactorily. And this is, of course, a discussion that can always be picked up. Like Paula mentioned, you can reach out through the details that you're seeing on your screen. You can also visit their website to read more about their about WorkPay and the solutions they have. And of course, we are living in an era of digital transformation, and it's really important that we start picking up automating most of the tasks that we do. One, it's easy for accuracy, and also it's easy for proper record keeping. You can easily find most of these documents that are stored on cloud anytime you want them, because I know many people still use the Excel spreadsheets like they mentioned earlier, but still they're facing challenges in terms of having to use the same document with the several people accessing at the same times. So engaging professionals like the ones we have at WorkPay can really go a long way in terms of improving the work processes in the different entities that you represent. We can always, Paula is in the WhatsApp group for your skill boost. You can also reach out to her via WhatsApp and pick up the discussion. I wish you all the very best of your, enjoy the remaining part of your day and take good care of yourselves.
Thank you, Bida. For the rest, again, big thank you for that. And I hope to continue the discussions on WhatsApp or email as advised.